away you go.
Oh, thanks, Billy. Thanks, Daniel. Hey, everyone. It's nice to be here. Lovely to be here and see some familiar names and some other people that I don't recognize, but thanks either way for joining. I'm keen to talk about music management with you, and I'll share my screen so you guys can hopefully see this. All right. Can everybody see this? Sweet. Where are we? Okay. Yeah, so obviously I'm here to talk a little bit about music management. I'll start off with just a little bit about myself for those who may not know me and my background. So I am a part of CRS Music Management, who are a New Zealand-based management and promotions company. And so I've been a part of CRS now for about 8 years, who through CRS I've managed and worked alongside The Naked and Famous, Brooke Fraser, Benny, Madoki, and Miss June, just to name a few. And on the promotion side, CRS Presents, we used to run Big Day Out in New Zealand before it came to an end. And we also run Auckland City Limits and another summer series festival here called Outer Fields. And I guess a little bit about how I kind of got into management, or what I used to do before I became an artist manager. I kind of got into the industry, or came into the scene by doing sort of freelance journalism while I was still sort of at school, juggling schoolwork. I started writing for a few online music blogs, and then from there I launched a couple of my own publications, so I could write about any specific artist that I wanted to. Aptly titled by my teenage self, New Zealand Music Madness, because that's what I was very passionate about at the time. And then later on, I started another one called Kicking Roses, which was another music platform where I also used to run a few gigs through them as well. And through after that as well, I did a little bit of radio presenting for 95 BFM, which is a student radio station here. And they also used to run like a monthly series they'd get musicians in and put up a series of them performing at Neil Finn's Roundhead Studios, which I tried my hand at videography for them for a while, basically because the day that I started working at 95 BFM, their videographer quit, and they asked if I knew anyone they asked if I could do any videography, and I just finished an assignment at school in media studies where I had to pretend that I knew how to film, so I just said yes and jumped straight into it and learned along the way. And then from there, I guess I kind of became more interested in management, or started learning a lot more about management kind of just by falling into it. I sort of became, I guess, like I was a very big fan of the artist Jen Wigmore, and I was promoting her a lot on my across my two blogs that I had, just because I was a big fan. And yeah, kind of got to know her, and then she sort of asked if she invited me to come on tour with her, and sort of to kind of become a part of her team and learn a little bit about artist management and learn from her tour manager and kind of her team. So I started learning a lot more about that side of the industry within artist management through her, which was really awesome. So that was kind of up until this point. But then nowadays, mostly I predominantly focus on managing Benny within CRS. So I've kind of managed her for the past 5 years, sort of basically since her career started. And I also manage Madoki within CRS. And last year, exactly a year ago today, actually, Benny or Stella and I launched Olive Records. And through Olive Records, so that's one of my main priorities now, is I also run Olive Records with her. And yeah, thus far we've signed Madoki and There's a Tuesday, two really cool young up and coming bands in New Zealand here who are doing awesome stuff. So yeah, that's a little bit about me. Hopefully I didn't go over that too fast, but just thought I'd fill you in. And yeah, so I don't know if it's a little bit too premature to ask if there's any questions, but I thought I'd go over, this is kind of what I'm going to discuss and go through over today's presentation. So I'll dive into this, but yeah, if there's any other questions, there is a lot of my slides do have quite a lot of information on them. So I will go through kind of each point, so it's not too overwhelming, but do feel free to kind of stop me at any point and ask any questions, or, you know, some of this at the beginning may kind of seem pretty simple or obvious, but I thought I'd cover it just because it's funny enough how often questions like what exactly is artist management is asked. So I thought I'd cover them just in case, you know, people want to know how I sort of interpret it or explain it. But yeah, so I thought, you know, I'd go over the obvious kind of questions at the beginning that do get asked quite a lot, which is what exactly artist management is and kind of the role of a manager and what they do. Because there's no really simple ways to sum those up and explain them, but I'll do my best in how I usually talk about them. And then I thought I'd go into from the artist side, if you are an artist and if you're trying to decide, you know, how and when to know if it's time for you to get a manager and if having a manager would actually be beneficial for you. And if you've established that you do want a manager or you are ready for one, then I've got a few do's and don'ts of how to go about finding one. And I don't want to go too far into the nitty gritty of contracts and what deals look like, because that's kind of a whole another world and conversation on its own, but I will touch on what a management deal does kind of tend to look like, and we can go over some points there. And again, yeah, ask me any questions if you've got anything specific relating to that. And then on the other side of the table, I thought if you're not an artist and you're more interested in actually becoming an artist manager, I'm super passionate at the moment about trying to encourage as many people to get into the field of artist management, because I think definitely within New Zealand anyway, and I'm sure in parts of Australia as well, we are lacking managers. We've got some really great managers, but the managers that are here, we're working with a lot of artists and there's only so much we can do. So it's kind of no one can really take on any other artists at the moment because we're so busy. So I'm putting a lot of importance at the moment for me as well on finding young people that are interested in management and helping them kind of get into that field, because I think it's really important that we have some cool new managers rise up in the world. So yeah, I'll go over a little bit about how to become an artist manager and then how to help your artist kind of break through the noise amongst all the rest of the artists and everything that's out there. But yeah, before I get started, I guess maybe I'll stop here quickly to say, let me know if I'm going too fast. Let me know if there's any specific questions at any point. But yeah, is there any questions at the moment that anyone has about any of that, or something that I haven't covered that they'd like me to talk about?
I have a question for you, if that's all right. I think you tell me if you're going to cover this later on in the presentation, but I wanted to ask you what you think. If you have someone around you, what are some things to look out for that might make them a good manager if you're an artist? Like if you have a friend that, you know, maybe they're like really good, really well organized, or maybe they're really passionate about music, what's something that you think artists can look out for in like the people that are around them in the music scene that would make someone a good artist manager?
Yeah, I do like touch on it a little bit later on, but I'll say, yeah, definitely, you know, if you've got people around you, and I'd say, yeah, kind of organized, being sort of organized is the key. And if you're the key kind of importance of being a manager as well is that you've kind of got to have the love and the passion for music there. So it's kind of being a manager as much of loving music and being super passionate about it as it is kind of also knowing or learning a little bit about the industry side as well. So you don't have to be, I sort of touch on later on as well, I discuss the whole thing of becoming a manager and whether studying versus not studying and the experience versus volunteering. I cover that later on. Yeah, so I'll go through a little bit more of that as well. But yeah, I think definitely, yeah, you've got to love music, and you don't have to be super business savvy in the beginning, because that's something you can learn later on as you become in the industry a little bit more. But yeah, hopefully that kind of touches on it for now, and then I'll go into that a little bit more later on. But was there anything else, or should I get started for everyone?
Just had one question, and sorry if I missed it. Are you going to make this presentation available? Yep. Cool.
So the recording of today's presentation.
I realize that. Yeah.
Oh yeah, we'll be live on the Music ACT website in the next couple of days, and the slides as well.
Okay, good. Thanks.
Will be available as well.
Cool. Yeah, because it gets pretty wordy, but I promise I'll try and break it down so it makes a little more sense. But I thought I'd start with what actually is artist management, because it is, again, it may seem simple or obvious to some people or people who are already in the industry, but it is a question that comes up a lot. And it's not one that's kind of easy to answer or sum up in a couple of sentences. It's hard to kind of break down what exactly it is, but this little graph here is kind of the best way that I've found to sort of visually explain it and kind of break it down to make it as easy as possible for people. But the way I like to talk about what actually is artist management is imagine that you've got a big, large corporation who in this case is the artist or band. So they are the business, the product, and the brand. And then obviously within a corporation, you've got the CEO who is the artist manager. So they manage all of the departments within the corporation. And then those departments in our case, as well as what's made up of everyone on the artist team. So you've got your label, agent, publisher, publicity, marketing people, whoever that may be. Or if you're just starting out and you don't have those departments, then it generally falls on the CEO or artist manager to it's their job to build up those departments, and then they kind of go out and find those people for you and build up your team. So then you've got all these departments on your side. So really the manager is kind of the mediator between the artist and the rest of the world, I guess is the easiest way to explain it. You're kind of like the buffer between the artist and the industry, so you can focus on the business side and they can kind of take more time to focus on the art and creativity without having to spend too much time getting bogged down by the admin or the business side that comes with artist management, so hopefully that makes a little bit of sense. But yeah, so then I thought that kind of leads on to what is it that managers actually do? And that's another question that's not exactly necessarily easy to sum up in a couple of sentences or one paragraph, because the list can kind of go on and on of what they do. But I thought for me and from my experience, I'd touch on some of, I guess, the main priorities of an artist manager, at least, and again, it may differ slightly depending on what stage an artist is at in their career, but regardless of what stage any artist is at, really the number one kind of priority of any manager is to support the artist's creative vision and develop career strategies for and with the artists, and then handle the coordination of those plans. So any kind of good manager, it's their main role to sort of be a good judge of which activities your artists should or shouldn't take part in. And you've kind of always got to keep in mind that some opportunities can harm their career and reputation, while others could make it thrive. So I guess one example for me lately that I've been working through with Miroki, one of the artists that I work with, is that he grew up in a town called Raglan here in New Zealand, which is very chilled, very laid back. And, he loves surfing and skating, which is it's a big part of his identity and his personality. But because of that, every second media request that we get or interview or whatever it may be wants to incorporate that somehow into their interview. They want to film him surfing or skating. They want to include it, which it's maybe not the best example because it's not necessarily something that's going to harm his career or reputation, but it's kind of something as a manager, or that I personally have sort of sit back and had to think about with him, to be like, okay, everyone sort of knows it's part of your personality and your identity, but how many interviews do we want to put out there with you surfing or skating? Like, there becomes a point that we're trying to tell a bigger story here about him as an artist, and it's not just not every single piece or information about him needs to kind of be linked back to surfing or skating. So that's just kind of a little, there's other examples, obviously, that's kind of a little one in terms of ways that you can sit back and think about things like that from that point of view. But I guess as far as other priorities go for what an artist manager actually does for artists, so one main thing that they do is develop, negotiate, and pursue contracts, deals, and fees. So again, if you're a young artist or young up-and-coming artist who's just starting out, that could be starting from the beginning in terms of helping you build and expand your team. So helping you get in front of labels, or perhaps you want to get a publishing deal and we're going to help you find a publisher. Or it could also be producer agreements. So perhaps you're getting in the studio and working with other producers and songwriters, and managers will sit back and we can, work out the agreement with the producer, whether it's splits or royalties or how that's going to work on your behalf. Or from a touring point of view, or playing shows, we can sort out the deals with promoters, perhaps promoters and agents, or if you don't have an agent on board, then the manager will be talking with the promoter. So we'll be working out your fees and deals and what's going to come in those contracts of where you're playing and what you're going to get and whatnot. And then under that same kind of realm, you've got what managers do is creating and manage budgets, cash flow, along with writing grants and sponsorship proposals, marketing plans, product release plans, which obviously once you've built up your team, you can get other people to help you with this. But managers will always, particularly, managing budgets is a big one for artist managers, whether we're working on their product release plan. So whether that's how much money we've got to spend to create merch for our artists, or how much money you've got to spend for a video shoot or a promo shoot, and how much money is going into that and then coming out of it. And so yeah, obviously managing budgets is a big one, because the manager is in charge of your cash flow and will help you with that. And writing grants and sponsorship proposals as well. That's another big one. I know we've got like New Zealand Air funding over here, and you guys in Australia also, I know, have lots of different funding grants that you can go for, whether it's single recording funding or funding to help you with the promotion or creation of video content and things like that. Managers will also spend lots of their time kind of fleshing out those proposals and submitting them on the artist's behalf, which then leads into another priority that managers have is setting goals, analyzing data, track and measure results. So, and the goals as well can be, again, depending on what stage you're at as an artist, it can start at, for example, like a goal for us with Miroki lately has been getting his song played on Triple J. So the setting goals could be getting your songs onto Triple J, or getting it onto New Music Friday, or they could be as big as, I want to find Benny a slot at Coachella, or we'd love for her to get onto Lollapalooza. So it's kind of setting those goals and also kind of being realistic about the goals, obviously, as well. So it's like, I'm not going to sit down with Miroki and go, we want to get Miroki on Coachella within a year, because that's really not realistic. But it's setting those goals no matter what stage they're at, and then analyzing the data. And from that, so maybe, you've got your song on Spotify, and then there's so much data there across DSPs where you can track that, which also helps within my next point as well, booking shows and tours and developing touring strategies. A lot of that data can be very useful for that, because maybe you're looking at your routing and where you're going to go, where you're going to play shows and where you're going to tour. And that data can really help you in terms of, you can have a look at what your top countries are, and when you're routing, you can go, okay, well, I really want to go play a show in Japan, but is it worth going to Japan when only like 10% or 5% of my audience are actually in Japan, versus going to play a show in New York where maybe 90% of my fans are from New York. So you can use that kind of data to help with booking shows and in terms of developing strategies there, and working with agents, which is something that managers will do as well, and along with the production teams. And then another thing with the booking shows as well is the support versus headline sort of discussion and coming up with the best markets. So, you don't want to throw a new artist, or as a new artist, you don't want to kind of jump straight into touring Europe when maybe no one even knows who you are there, or they've never heard of you. And maybe it kind of pays to step back and go. So I guess for an example of that actually maybe is, so Benny, when we were looking at taking her over to tour the US, and she had Super Lonely was out and she had a fairly good audience there, but we got offered the support slot for the Conan Gray tour a few years ago, and that was kind of support tours are always a good way to kind of gauge your audience and see, you know, how many people are interested, and like, is it worth, you know, if the support tour goes well, is it worth then coming back later on and doing your own headline tour? And what kind of, that will give you an idea potentially of what kind of venues may be good for you to look at later on down the line as well. So that's another good kind of point to think of within booking shows and tours and things like that. And another thing managers do, another priority of theirs, is developing itineraries and managing calendars. I always tell every young manager and or even artists as well that Google Calendars should be your best friend. Like, I love my Google Calendars because I have about 30 of them, and when I look at it, it looks super colorful and it's very aesthetically pleasing. But yeah, so you are, you know, as a manager, you are developing itineraries and managing your artist calendars. And that's not only day-to-day, but their long-term schedules as well. So maybe your day-to-day, you're looking at, okay, it's a promo day and you've got this much media to do. You've got a couple of hours of interviews here, but then it's looking ahead as well and going, okay, I really need Benny to get in the studio, or she's going to have these writing sessions for a couple of months. And it's kind of scheduling that in a way that is beneficial to her and kind of works within whatever else we've got planned as well. So yeah, day-to-day and long-term schedules as well, and make Google Calendars or whatever other kind of calendars that you use your best friend, because it's very helpful. And last of all, another main priority of the artist manager, essentially, basically, as kind of almost within many businessy roles, is just a shitload of administrative work. You're going to be doing a lot of writing, lots of talking, lots of discussions. And yeah, basically there's not much more to that point other than it is a shitload of administrative work, which can be fun sometimes. Is there any questions about any of that before I jump on to the next thing?
Please ask some questions, guys. I don't want to hog all these questions, but I'm going to.
No, that's fine. I can carry on.
I have just a little question for you. Like, you've just based on this, what you've kind of outlined here, like, this is a lot of responsibility, even for very, you know, even for like emerging artists, that building a team might just be finding a manager, or just might be finding a gig. When you get to the scale where, like the scale where you're at, where you've got artists performing on the Tonight Show, and you're kind of at that scale, have you got any tips on, I guess, like getting yourself in front of, or getting yourself in those kind of opportunities to succeed? Like, what kind of tips have you got for seeking out those kinds of opportunities?
As an artist seeking out those, like I'm going to park that question and come back to it, because I'm going to cover that in some of this, and then if I don't, bring it up again at the end and remind me.
I do have one other question, not from me.
Yeah.
This one is from Flo. She asks, what's the role of an agent, and where does it fit in the picture of the whole team?
Oh, that's a good question. So with your booking agent, that's another good point as well, is within talking about management as well. I do cover it a little bit later on, but if you're an artist looking to build your team, you don't necessarily, the manager doesn't have to come first. So you can build your team with, I know lots of self-managed artists who just have agents. So you can get a booking agent on board. So maybe you're handling the self-managing thing fine, but booking shows, you're wanting to play shows and tour a lot more. And so the idea of having a booking agent, getting a booking agent on board for you will be helpful in terms of just being able to pass off some of that responsibility to them. So an agent really will will work with you. It kind of comes with that book shows tours point as well, is that's kind of also what an agent does, is that they will work with you and or your team and help you sort of develop your touring strategies and the best markets that you want to go to. So on your behalf, they'll be the ones who will reach out to the venues. So say if you're here, I'm trying to think of venues in Canberra, UC Hub. Say if you want to play a show there, they'll talk to the venue there, maybe they'll book it for you. And then, you know, they'll kind of, they'll do everything in terms of organizing the show. So you just kind of don't have to take care of that responsibility anymore. And you don't have to have a manager or anyone like that to have a booking agent. You can easily just get a booking agent as well, or instead of a manager, if you just want to focus on playing more shows, which is also really great. So an agent can definitely help you best develop your strategies for touring and moving forward, and help you decide on the best markets. Or they can also put you forward for support tours as well. So they can pitch you to other promoters who are putting on big shows and give you a shot at getting a support tour, which may be, it's sometimes good coming from an agent. And it's, if you don't have those connections or putting yourself forward for a tour, sometimes it's a little bit tricky. You're not sure what to do. An agent will kind of help with those roles. Is there another question there? Or is that the question I just answered?
That's right. It looks like we've got another question from Rachel. Let me, yeah, you've unmuted yourself. Great.
Yeah. Hey guys, thank you so much, Poppy, for telling us all about what you do. My question was, other than Google Calendars, what other programs do you like to use for like organization or promo prep or anything like that?
Great question.
That is a great question. I know that there is a lot of different kind of programs and things out there, and it's very overwhelming to me. So I like to stick with the basics. I guess I predominantly use Google Calendars, just because a lot of my calendars as well, a lot of different people are linked to them. So for me, I find Google Calendars a very easy way to kind of have multiple people across the one calendar. But I also input everything from my Google Calendar into my phone calendar and write it down in my actual diary. So like so I have everything in multiple different places so I can remember. But yeah, I know that's kind of, there is no really actually other major kind of programs as such that I use for organizational things. I know that there is a ton out there, and I'd probably be better off if I did use more, to be honest, but it's very overwhelming, and I just love my Google Calendar.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
And I think we've got one more question from Mark.
Poppy, I was just wondering, the most daunting thing for me when I look at that is understanding what a good contract or deal or fee is, or examples of that. I was just wondering how you navigated through that, or are there good resources or ways to try and give yourself some sort of a grounding or base on where you should work from and what you should expect and offer, etc.
Yeah, for as managers working with artists and artists working with managers.
As being an artist manager, so if you're developing, negotiating, pursuing contracts, obviously you've got to write them up and work out what's going to be the right fee or what to ask for. And if it's something you're not familiar with, you don't know what you're competing with, etc. So I was just wondering if there's a way to, how you navigate that initially, at least. Obviously, seeing other contracts and that as examples is a good way if you can get hold of them.
Yeah, definitely. I will go over the contracts bit very shortly, but there is definitely resources out there online, and I talk about it a little bit later on as well. But in terms of management as well, I mean, here in New Zealand, we've got the Music Managers Forum, and I know that you guys have the Artists Managers Association, I think it is, as well. And I know you don't have to be like a professional manager or anything to be members of those forums online. So they offer great resources online for you to look at that have a lot of information, and a lot of them will even have videos, or you can be mentored by people, or they'll have contacts there of people that you can reach out to and ask if you do have like specific questions related to contracts and things like that. You can kind of ask them or talk to somebody about it. And yeah, obviously there is as well online other resources of even like templates of contracts that you can look at, or hopefully if you've got a lawyer on your side, you can kind of you can talk to a lawyer about it, and that's always helpful as well, depending on what level you're looking at or thinking about. But yeah, there's definitely a lot of resources online, And I'll touch on it a little bit more as well in the when I go over the management deals and contracts. But if it doesn't cover it off, let me know if you've got any other specific questions around that bit too.
Thank you.
I've just dropped a link in the Zoom chat as well to the Association of Artist Managers that Poppy just mentioned. That's an Australian organisation as well. Yeah, have a look at that link if you want to join up and learn a bit more about it.
They do offer great, like, I know, especially at the moment in lockdown, there's been a lot of great like mentor sessions, or you can have one-on-one mentor sessions with a manager or people within the industry. And then they have like group sessions as well, where you can have more of a discussion with multiple people and get lots of different viewpoints from everyone, which can always also be useful as well if you want to kind of have a discussion and get different points from different people. So yeah, they are great resources. We also here have one. We've got the New Zealand Music Directory, which is more so for, it's a great tool to use for kind of getting people's contact details in terms of seeing what companies are out there and what they're doing. And it's a great tool that can be used for if you're wanting to get into networking and meeting more people and making connections within the industry. And I'm sure you guys probably have another one there similar in Australia.
Absolutely.
But I will move on to, there we go. I thought I'd just quickly touch on the artist and manager relationship. So the relationship between a manager and artist, just because it is quite a core part. Again, it may seem something it's not super interesting, but it does play a core part to the success of kind of both parties. And so, yeah, the relationship between an artist and a manager, it's a collaborative partnership. Obviously, it's very much like a marriage, and the glue that holds the relationship together is trust more than anything. So, and again, every artist and manager relationship is completely different. So if you're an upcoming artist or an artist who's at any stage in their career, and you're talking to your friends who also have artist managers, and things are sounding a bit different, how they work with theirs compared to how you work with your own manager, then don't sweat it, because there's no sort of normal or right or wrong way to kind of conduct the artist and manager relationship. It's different for everyone. And one important thing though that I've always sort of found between that artists and managers should do is kind of clearly distinguish a line between your business relationship and your friendship, particularly because as an artist manager, you are spending a lot of time together or communicating with each other at least. So, it comes back to that trust thing. You've got to have that trust, but by spending that much time together and working together so closely, you are going to form a friendship. And for me as well, working with Benny and Miroki and a number of other artists who are not too far from my age, or we're kind of within that same age group, they're a little bit younger than me, but we are, obviously there is a solid friendship there as well, which is kind of the platform that our relationship is based on too. But there does become a point, when I'm talking with Benny and we're talking about business, or we're going over deals or contracts or money and stuff like that you do need to kind of have this line between, okay, I'm your friend, but I'm talking to you now as your manager, and here's how this conversation is going to go, versus us just sort of hanging out and chatting as friends about something kind of off and on. And then, so yeah, you've got that. And then another point is these next 3 points are kind of what a manager really should do, I guess, as well. So it's kind of an important thing for a manager to do. It comes into the previous slide of what a manager does and their important roles. It's really important to ensure that the artist gets the creative time they need and to protect that space for them, and be patient with them and understand where they're coming from and explain your side after acknowledging theirs. So as in any relationship, you're never going to agree on everything. You're never going to be 100% across the board or for every decision that comes your way. But, be patient with them and let them explain their side of the story or what they're thinking, because you're looking after their career, you're helping them make decisions. So make sure you hear their side of the story first and then acknowledge that. And then you can move on and be like, okay, well, maybe I don't agree with you putting up all these videos on TikTok all the time. Here's another way we could go about it, or something like that. Multiple examples within that world, obviously, but yeah, just be patient with one another. And yeah, there's always going to be times where you don't fully agree on everything, but that's what part of the relationship is about, is compromising, figuring out the best way to go about something that's going to be good and make everyone happy, and in the long run be best for everyone. Which sort of leads on to the last point as well, about how communication is obviously key, which, you know, you're going to be communicating with each other every day, so you need to be comfortable with being honest with one another. A big thing for us was how much Stella Ubeni learned to kind of say no. She's really stepped up and learned that, you know, it's her career. She makes the decisions. She doesn't have to say yes to everything, and she doesn't need to be afraid to tell me stuff that she doesn't want to do. So if I present her with an idea or an opportunity that could be really cool, or, you know, it's a great opportunity or whatever it may be, I can present it to her and she can be completely honest with me and be like, no, I don't like this. I don't think it doesn't suit my vision or creative vision as an artist. So you've got to be comfortable with being honest with one another, and which just kind of feeds into that whole thing, that the whole relationship really is centered around trust. Otherwise, it's not going to work or last very long. And then, is there any questions maybe before I jump into the next side of the presentation, which is more centered around finding a manager as an artist?
I don't think we have any at this stage. I
Cool.
think just keep tearing through it.
All right, I'll keep going. So this is now, so if you are an artist, and this is kind of, yeah, if you are an artist, this is about, and you're thinking of finding a manager, you think that you're ready to find a manager. You know, a lot of artists will kind of think about, they decide that they want a manager because, you know, you hear that every other artist has a manager and suddenly you want one. But I've had a lot of emails from young up and coming artists who kind of email me and they say, oh, I'd love for you to manage me. Can you manage me? But they can't sort of tell me exactly what they're expecting from a manager or what it is they want me to do from them, which, like, I can't, as managers, you can't be expected to, if an artist doesn't know exactly what they want from a manager, then how are we expected to know how we can help you, or what we can do to help build your career? So really the biggest thing that an artist manager can offer you is the chance to focus on your creativity if you're an artist. So while it is kind of said or true that having a good manager can kind of help make or break your career, that is why more so than ever that it's important to kind of have a clear understanding of what exactly it is that they do. So, and then, yeah, next point. So admin versus creativity. So obviously being within the music industry, there's a lot of administrative work that kind of comes into being a manager. And at some point as an artist, there's going to become a point where you realize, where you're going to question whether, like, but it's going to become hard, I guess, to juggle your responsibilities with finding the time to still be an artist and finding time to get in the studio and still be creative. So sort of weigh up your time. I guess if you're an artist and you're thinking about whether you should get a manager, sort of weigh up your time and only sort of step forward into hiring a manager when you can kind of no longer juggle those responsibilities. It's becoming too much for you to handle both, and then still focus on actually being an artist and creating your art. And also when it's worth kind of paying someone a percentage of your income, because when you do bring on a manager and a team or agent or promoters, you know, you are going to be paying, these people are, particularly if the management relationship, they are going to be getting a percentage of your income. So kind of weigh up and realize, if it is suddenly becoming too much for you to be able to do both, then maybe now is the time to bring on a manager. And if you've got enough going on, okay, you're at a point where it is worth paying someone that percentage. And again, like I said initially, like, don't hire a manager just for the sake of it. You can do so much. You don't necessarily need a manager in the beginning, depending on what stage that you're at. Sort of, it's an important thing to do as an artist no matter what stage you're at, is sort of to establish what you need and want from a manager first. Whether it could just be as simple as you making a list and going, okay, you know, this is what I really need. You know, I'm ready to take my career to the next step. This is what I need or want a manager to help me with. Kind of take into account really what a manager can actually do for you and what it is you want them to help you achieve. And because a lot of managers are looking for artists already who have something to manage. And that doesn't necessarily mean that you have to, you know, have a hit song on the radio or be playing shows to sold out audiences. But managers are always looking for, you know, if you've got a uniqueness there or a vision or a drive to sort of take your career to the next step, or you have established yourself to a certain degree. So you've played a number of shows, you've got an engaged social media account and fan base who are kind of, and it shows that you're building that and people are interested. And or if you're a bit more of an established artist and you've got, you know, you have established yourself to a certain degree, but you're unsure of the next steps to elevate your career. So maybe, you know, you've taken your career on your own to as high as you can go and you're not sure of the next steps, then a manager will be able to, you know, see everything that you've got there. If you've got, you know, you've got a package there to go with, then a manager will see that and go, okay, that's when we can easily slip in and help you take it to the next stage. And a good sign that you are ready for a manager in the industry is when people start reaching out to you, when people start paying attention to what you're doing. So, and whether that's actually another manager, or it could be A&R people, or it could be labels, any other industry professionals. If people are, you know, we're always kind of listening and looking to see what's out there. So if people do start if people in the industry do start paying attention to what you're doing, then that can also be a good sign that, oh, maybe I should kind of focus on this and bring someone else on board to help me kind of utilize this time that people are watching and then helping me take it to the next stage or the next level. And then I guess, so if you are an artist and you've established that you do need a manager, or you are ready for a manager, ideally it would sort of happen, it tends to, and it would happen more naturally as opposed to you going out and really trying to find a manager on your own. But it doesn't mean to say that you can't go out and do a number of steps to help you try find a manager, or at least kind of start that journey. So I came up with like a little do's and don't lists, I guess, for if you've gotten to the point where you really do want a manager and perhaps no one has paid attention or knows what you're doing at the moment because they haven't heard of you. Well, then a couple of do's and don'ts that I always like to share with up and coming artists, or whichever stage you're at, is, again, do know what you're looking for and what you can offer each other. So, you know, if you're reaching out to managers saying that you think you're ready for a manager, tell us exactly what it is you've got. Again, with that package, we're looking that you've got something, at least a little something there that we can work with to build on and help you take your career to whichever level you may want to. Another important thing that you can do is do your research into other management companies. So again, there's lots of useful tools online. You can research different management companies or perhaps other managers that you've heard of. And even do research into their previous and current rosters, so you can kind of get a gauge on the type of artists that they perhaps work with or have worked with in the past, because that will give you an idea of, you know, if you're a pop artist and if you're reaching out to like a manager that mostly only manages heavy rock artists, well then like they're going to see your email and go that, oh, this person probably clearly has no idea of what I usually do. Not to say that they may want to expand their horizons and start managing a different artist, but you know, if you're sending cold call emails particularly, like it pays to at least sort of know who they've worked with or have a little bit of insight into them, so you can show that you're not just sending and rewriting the same email to 100 different people. And we touched on this a little earlier as well, but something that is really useful if you're looking for a manager or trying to find a manager is, utilize those valuable resources that are kind of they're at your hand. They're free, or, you know, the things like the Music Managers Forum and the Association of Artist Managers and the Music Directory that I touched on before. All of those resources and places are there online for you to kind of, and yeah, a lot of them are free, or you don't have to be a professional manager or artist to sign up to them or be a part of them, but they do offer things like mentorships and really valuable information that you can kind of find on there that will be useful for whichever part of the industry you're trying to get into. And another thing to do is reach out and talk to any connections that you may already have. So whether they're industry professionals, or if you've got friends who are in bands or hang out with bands, or perhaps you know some clients of other managers, or even just sending them a message on Instagram and seeing if they'll respond back. If they're up and coming artists, it's always good to kind of, I mean, networking is always key, I like to say. And if you've got any kind of connections, use them. Just start conversations, ask them about their experiences, ask them for recommendations. Maybe they could send you in the right direction of an artist to reach out to, or let you know what their experience was like working with a manager or finding a manager or anything. Like use your resources, because that's one of the main key useful things at the end of the day. It's going to really help you is any people that you already know that may be able to give you answers. And also, yeah, be patient as well. So like I touched on before, it very rarely happens unnaturally in terms of artists finding managers. So it's not to say that don't cold call or don't cold email managers. You can definitely send emails and let us know what, you know, if you're releasing music, or invite us to a show, because, you know, I particularly spend a lot of time going to shows to see other artists and see who's out there. And if someone lets me know that they're playing a gig, I will try and get along if I can. But yeah, so don't rush into anything. Like, again, there's nothing wrong with being self-managed, and you don't want to kind of rush into finding a manager or doing, like, signing an agreement with a manager just for the sake of it. So be patient, it will take time. And yeah, it usually does tend to happen more naturally in terms of artists finding managers. So don't be disheartened by that, but do just be patient with the process, because it will happen when it best happens. And in terms of a couple of little points of things that you should steer clear of if you're looking for a manager, is I always try to tell young artists not to email their favorite band's manager, or to reach out to a manager that already represents a similar artist to you. So my inbox always gets inundated with artists who say to me that they want to be the next Benny, or they say, I wrote this song and it's really awesome. I sound exactly like Benny. And as heartwarming and as great it is to see that she is out there inspiring other artists, you know, as managers, we're always looking for something fresh and new, not the same. You know, like, I already manage Benny. I don't need to find another person who's very similar or exactly like her, because I want to build my roster that's diverse and got lots of different interesting artists on it. And at the same time, as an artist as well, you don't want to be competing on the roster. So if you were an artist that was really similar to Benny, and I did take you on, or I did start managing you, then you don't want to yourself be competing for my time, or you don't want to be competing on a roster against an artist who's very similar to you. It's not beneficial for you yourself, or the manager in the end either. And I go a little bit further into the contract side of things in the next slide. But a big one is don't work with anyone without a contract, which is kind of a point that may again seem obvious, but that it does happen that artists and managers get into working together and they don't have a contract. Like, short term, maybe, I discussed that next as well, but in the long term, you know, if you're really committing to working together, then you need to have some kind of contract in place, or if you don't, that's kind of how things can get messy, and especially if the relationship doesn't work out. it can turn pretty nasty pretty quickly if there's no written agreement to kind of go back to, if there's nothing set in stone. Also, another point is just don't be afraid to do it yourself in the end. So if you're really trying hard to find a manager and then you're sitting back and it's just nothing's happening, then don't be afraid. Just again, be patient. Like being self-managed is not failing, and it doesn't mean, like we talked about earlier, it doesn't mean that you can't necessarily have other people around you and your team helping out. Like if you don't have a manager, you can still have an agent, or you could still have a publicist. You could still get a publicist on board to help you promote your single or service it to radio for you. It doesn't mean that you can't have those other people in your team around you, so that can take some of that admin responsibility off you as well, without fully committing to having a manager, which also in the long run as well it allows you to develop a greater understanding of the industry and the business side of it. So by the time you do get a manager, or when you get to the point of finding a manager and having a deal with them, you've got an even better understanding of what it is that they do or should be doing for you, or what they're working on. So that can also be really useful if you've self-managed for a while. It really kind of gives you a bit more insight into the way the industry works, which is kind of an important point for any artist, really. And I did just point out some little great self-managed artists at the bottom here. I know in Australia you guys have Cub Sport and Spacey Jane, who have both are both really successful self-managed artists. They've both worked really hard and got themselves to a really good point, and they've done a lot of that on their own in terms of not having a manager. In New Zealand, we've got a really great pop duo here called Foley, who they've been self-managed for about 4 years now, I think. And they've got a booking agent now in Australia. They're with Niche, so they're slowly kind of building out their team. But in terms of management responsibilities, they've kind of really been driving that themselves for the last 3 to 4 years, along with Mel Parsons, who's another great Kiwi artist that has had some great success as well. And an international artist who I've been working with recently, Mia Nikolai, she's another one that is really she's been self-managed for a long time, and she's got some really awesome things happening and some really great things on the way. And she's been self-managed for a long time. So it's not, being self-managed is not impossible. And yes, sometimes having a manager can be easy, but be patient, and hopefully these little do's or don'ts can help you find or not find a manager in the meantime.
Super good.
And before I jump into the contract nitty-gritty management deal side, is there any questions while I take a sip of water?
Yeah, we do have a couple. I think you're going to get into some of this stuff now, but I'll ask you anyway.
Mm-hmm.
The first one is from Kim. She asks, in terms of a contract, would the manager start drafting something first and give it to an artist to review, or is it the other way around? Would it be the artist making the contract, or would it be the manager usually?
Usually the manager. Usually you'll discuss it, if you're thinking of if you've had the conversation there that we do want to commit to working together, then it will usually be the manager that will start drafting something. But as an artist, it does pay to know what you want, basically. So if you don't have to necessarily start drafting like a full contract as an artist, but you can come to the manager with perhaps a document or points or anything that you may want to discuss and put them out there. And it doesn't again have to be like a full contract, but you can put your points out there to be like, this is what I want or am expecting from this deal. And so then that can then be worked into the contract or deal itself.
Awesome. This is so great to see so many questions. Thank you so much, everyone. This next one is from Flo and Jane. This is a great question. As an artist or manager, how do you know that what you're doing is the right thing to do for the artist? How do you also trust that your manager knows what's best for you?
That is a great question. It comes down, I guess, to the communication thing. And so a lot of managers and artists, to begin with, I guess, there will be a period of you working together where you don't have a contract. So I know earlier I said don't work with a manager or anyone without a contract, but that's kind of long-term thinking. So there is always maybe like, generally it'll be around like 3 to 6 months of a period where, you know, say I'll meet an artist and I'm really interested in managing them and they're keen to be managed by me. And we'll go, okay, well, maybe, you know, let's see, because as well, you don't want to jump into sorting an agreement with an artist and then 3 months to 6 months down the line, you see that it's not working, the relationship's not working, and perhaps that trust or communication isn't there and the artist isn't feeling right about their decision, or the manager's going, actually, maybe this won't work. Then you've got a whole nother kettle of fish of then trying to get out of that agreement or trying to kind of get rid of that deal. So there will be a period of time, again, that can be negotiated between the artist and the manager themselves in terms of how long that period of time may be. It can be longer than 6 months if you want, but usually it'll be about like 3 to 6 months where you go, okay, let's test the waters, let's see how this goes. And, you know, let's see maybe you'll put out one song and then you'll see how it goes. And the artist is super happy with the work that the manager did. And then they're ready to commit then to going full time with the manager, or then bringing the manager on board and making it something more official.
All right. And then I think Rachel has a question. Yes.
Yeah, I have a couple questions. The first one is, do you think like venues or festivals or organizations or anything like that see artists who have managers as more professional than self-managed artists? So for example, if you were a self-managed artist and just sent like a cold email or something to someone, how do you make yourself seem as professional as people who have their own managers?
That's a great question, because I do know that is something a lot of artists do struggle with, and it is a hard one because the cold call, cold email is hard in any kind of scenario and situation. It is, I mean, I don't know that they'd necessarily, I suppose it depends on the promoters, but if you are reaching out to festivals, if you are reaching out to slightly bigger festivals, then kind of include, you don't want to, the thing with cold calling, cold emailing that I always say as well is, you know, generally the people you're emailing are quite busy or have a lot of emails coming in. And so you don't want to kind of bombard them with too much information. Like you don't want to kind of send an email you don't want to send an email to a promoter saying, I would love to play your festival. Here's everything you need to know about me. The email ends up being 5 pages long because it's just kind of, it gets a little bit overwhelming, or they're going to look at it and not even read it. But I do think like if you've got key kind of really good points in terms of, you know, here's a link to my music, maybe here's a couple of, you can list a couple, if you've played a couple of other notable shows or sold out shows, or the capacities, or any kind of things like that is always good to highlight. And I think, yeah, just kind of keeping it professional, but also kind of in a way that's sort of friendly, because some cold call emails can almost sort of be robotic, and it's kind of obvious that you're sending it on to 100 other promoters to try and get other shows and slots as well. So kind of you can still be business savvy about it and friendly at the same time, to be like, hey, you know, I've maybe one sentence about, hey, I love Splendor in the Grass. I've been so many times, and I really think that I could suit playing there, or something like that. And if you've had notable, like, any notable achievements, I guess it's the word I'm looking for, list those in the email, and particularly like put a link to your music early on. Don't kind of send 100 different, if you can, just send like one link that maybe has a bunch of your songs, rather than if you send me or other like festival promoters and people like that 10 different links of your songs. I can assure you they'll listen to the first maybe 2 and then move on, and it gets a bit overwhelming if there's lots of links. So hopefully that kind of answers the question, but I know it is difficult, like as a self-managed artist, kind of reaching out to those people, but it's not it's not impossible to kind of reach out to them in a way where they still take you seriously. If you write the email in terms of like, oh, look at me, I'm amazing and I really want to play a festival, you should book me because I'm the best. Well, then that's like, there's ways you can go a little bit over the top, obviously, but if you kind of keep it brief, have the information there, kind of list anything notable that you've done, and then and just sort of start a conversation with them, or even ask them to have coffee. Maybe sometimes that doesn't work for bigger festival promoters, but in terms of if you're looking at playing shows within venues, call the venue up and be like, hey, can I have a chat? And then follow it up with an email. And don't be afraid to follow it up as well if you don't hear back from them straight away, because again, like promoters and managers and booking agents and people are busy. And when I say follow up, I do say be careful with how many times you follow up, because if someone follows up 7 times, then that's just going to get really annoying and then they won't come back to you. But don't be afraid as a self-managed artist to reach out to venues and promoters and people like that directly, and let them know that, you know, notable stuff you've done and that you would love to play, and that a reason why you think it could really be beneficial to your career to play at their venue.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you so much. And I hope it's okay. I have another question. If there's
sure.
time.
No, we'll do this one more, and then I might, please keep sending through your questions and keep putting your hands up, and then we might just do a quick fire round at the end, just because I'm worried that we're going to be taking up too much time.
Probably.
My other question was, do you have any tips for self-managed bands? So if you are self-managed and you have like 4 of you, say, like, should you think about writing up a contract between all of you, or delegating roles for people doing specific things? Do you have any recommendations for that?
I think, that's a good point too. Like if you are a band, particularly, you know, if you're getting to a point where you are doing quite a lot and it's becoming, maybe it's not full time, but you know, you are equally all committing quite a lot of time to it, because it's no doubt that you've all got multiple other things going on in your life as well. And it doesn't hurt to definitely it doesn't have to be, again, like an official contract or anything too kind of professional, but it can be as simple as a written agreement on one page. If you are a band, being like, hey, maybe you as the singer can look after the booking side, booking the shows and tours for us, and then the drummer can take care of the media and doing the interviews and things like that. It doesn't hurt to necessarily have an agreement there if, you know, everyone is kind of ready and on the same page of taking things to the next step, or if it's kind of all fallen on one person and it's becoming a bit too much, you can kind of sit down and be like, hey, maybe can we delegate this out so it's a bit more fair? Sometimes I know some bands, like Miss June particularly, before we started managing them, they were self-managed for a very long time. And there was 2 of them who were much better at the business side of things, and they preferred to do it and let the other 2 just kind of be more in the creative world and not focus too much. They were still obviously involved in the decisions and that side of it. But if you're depending on, you know, if you're all committed and ready to take things to the next level and it's perhaps fallen on 1 or 2 people and you want to space it out more, then it definitely doesn't hurt to kind of sit down and at least have that conversation of delegating things a bit more, and maybe have a formal or informal agreement between you that's written down to make those decisions.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Beauty, nice one. All right, I think we can keep rolling. I do have one more question. Actually, I'll nip this one in the bud while we're here.
Yeah.
This one is from Kim. She says, silly question, there's no such thing, Kim. When does the artist pay a manager? After tax time? I guess for most self-managed artists, they only find out how much they're earning at tax time. So when's the best time to pay your artist manager? Or how does that structure usually work for you?
That is something that can be negotiated kind of within the contract, I guess. Like it can be, I don't even have one specific answer for that really, because it's different between every manager and artist. But you can, you know, like, for example, I was talking to a girl the other day who was interested in getting into management, and she rocked up to the artist and told her that I'm happy to be your manager, but I want a $4,000 monthly fee. And I said, well, good luck, because that's not how it works at all. I'd love to see any artist that you end up managing in the future, because that's going to be quite difficult. Because obviously, which I go into here actually as well with commission, is that managers are paid on a commission base with artists. So you can negotiate in terms of how that sort of payment works. But in terms of management, there is obviously very rarely ever, not that I've heard of, any kind of weekly, monthly, yearly fee. It's dependent on the agreement and negotiations that you have as well. It's usually, like if your artist is earning money, then so is the manager. And most agreements will be that, if you are an artist and you're still at a young up and coming stage and you're not earning that much money, well, then the manager is not going to take 15 to 20% of nothing, because there's no point, and that's not fair on anyone. And I know that doesn't really answer the question, but it can kind of be, around that tax time, or it can be every 6 months, or every kind of, depending on if you're touring a lot, or a lot of money is coming in, then you can just take commission off that money that's coming in as you go along. So it can kind of be a roll-on effect of, okay, all this money from merch and tours is coming in now, I'm just going to take my 20% cut on all of this as it comes in. So it doesn't get to the end of the year and you go, oh, now I'm going to take this bigger chunk. It sort of makes more sense if you're active and money's coming in all the time, to kind of just keep getting your commission as time goes on.
Beautiful. Thanks, Poppy.
No worries. And so I'll cover this bit quickly as well. I'm not going to go, this is I hate talking about contracts and things like that, because it's the worst part. But thankfully the other half of CRS is also a lawyer, so it's very helpful for me. But in terms of management deals, I'm not going to go too deep into the world of contracts and deals, but let me know if you have any specific questions, because there is a lot of kind of legal jargon that can come into these sorts of things. But essentially, the written agreement between the artist and the manager should outline the details of the relationship to ensure that the artist and manager are on the same page, which, like I said before, just kind of tends to help avoid any conflict in the future if things don't work out, as sometimes they don't, or artists move on and they look for a new manager. It's kind of just easier if you've got as much as you possibly can written down in writing there. So later on, if you need to part or whatever, everyone kind of knows what they're getting or where they're going. And we've touched on this as well throughout the whole thing, that never work with a manager without a contract long term. As I said earlier as well, it is kind of commonplace for managers to work with an artist in that kind of testing period time of anywhere from 3 to 6 months. And an artist can negotiate that as well, to be like, maybe you want to work with them for a year before you do anything, but the manager will probably come back as well and at some point and be like, because they're putting their time and effort into it as well. So that's why it's usually about a 3 to 6 months period before the manager commits to then fully putting all of their time and effort into it, and then coming up with a proper deal or contract. And so I've kind of outlined here, I guess, the main things that you can find in a management contract, which is, the first one really is sort of, how long is the term? So how long are you signing on as an artist for this person to manage you? So most management deals, from my experience that I've come across, will usually come with an initial term. Generally, it's a minimum of 1 year, but most management deals tend to be kind of anywhere between 2 to 5 years. And as the artist, that's obviously totally negotiable. If you're an artist and this is the first manager you've had, perhaps signing on for 5 years could be quite daunting, and that's quite a lot of time if you're just kind of feeling the way and trying to get an idea of if it's going to work, or is the manager going to be useful, is the manager going to help me achieve what I want to achieve. But so usually they will be between 2 to 5 years, and you can negotiate that as the artist with the manager in the beginning. And so, yeah, and then that usually a management contract will then come with an additional 1 to 2 options to extend the term. So that'll just kind of be, those options are there for being like, okay, well, if we sign on for 2 years, then I've got 1 to 2 options of the contract ends, and then there's a point where you go, okay, I do want to sign on and continue it on. So there's those options there if you want to just keep it rolling on. Sometimes a term can be based on album cycles rather than calendar years. It's not super common necessarily within management contracts, at least the ones that I've dealt with artists, but it tends to be more common with record label deals. So with, for example, Olive Records lately, you know, like the contracts I've been doing for those, a lot of more record label deals are based around album cycles. So you'll sign on an artist for 3 albums or 2 albums or whatever. It is possible to do that within a management deal, but yeah, like I say, it's not quite as common. And then, yeah, what we touched on before with commission. So managers are usually paid on commission, meaning that they are paid a percentage of what the artist earns, which is most commonly 15 to 20% of an artist's gross income. You can do net deals, but I'd say it's more common that you do gross income, and I don't want to go too much. You can kind of go right into the nitty gritty of gross versus net, but it tends to be 15 to 20% of an artist's gross income. So you're earning money when they are. And if any manager tries to kind of get you to pay any more than 20%, then that's generally quite a big red flag. I'd say step back and take a look at what's been agreed there, because that's very uncommon. You know, it really is. Most contracts will be 15 to 20%. And that is something, again, as well as the artist, that you can negotiate at the beginning with your manager or the person that you're doing the contract and deal with, to say that you want 15 to 20. And it is possible for that to, you can change that within the term of the contract as well. So maybe you start as a band and you're just starting out and you've agreed to 15%, but then things go crazy and take off and you start earning a lot more money, and the manager may come to you and say that, okay, well, now things are kind of blowing up and you're getting a lot more income. How about we discuss making this go up to 20% in income? And you can have a clause in the contract that conversation can happen should your career or music or anything take off. But that's something that you should definitely discuss at first, because if the manager or artist suddenly wants to if the manager usually wants to up that percentage, and there's no kind of real conversation around that in the first place, then you as an artist have every right to stand on your leg and say, no, we agreed 15% and there's no going back. One other thing that I will kind of touch on that is becoming more and more common in most management contracts is the sunset clause. And so that allows the manager to kind of get a share of the artist's revenue after the management contract expires. So say you've signed on for 2 or 3 years and that 3 years has come to an end and you've decided that you don't want to extend it anymore, you don't want to be managed by this person anymore, then your contract expires, and then but the sunset clause means that, you know, your manager has put all this work into these tracks that are now out, and even though you're not working together anymore, they still deserve some income coming from these tracks for the time that they worked on when you two were working together. So it just essentially reduces the percentage the artist owes to the manager over time, and then eventually extinguishes this obligation entirely. And usually the sunset clause, again, something you can negotiate, but most contracts that I've seen, that sunset clause will usually be for about 18 to 24 months on average. Once the contract has expired, so then the manager will keep getting that money for 18 to 24 months. And I just outlined some examples of how the sunset clause can be structured in a contract. And so sometimes it'll look like you've got 6 months with a standard rate, followed by 6 months with a 50% reduction, followed by 6 months again with a 75% reduction until those months are all up. And another way that it can look is you've got 12, which is a little bit more intense, is you've got the 12 months with 100% of the manager's initial rate, followed by 12 months with a 50% reduction. So that's just some ways that it can can look like. And I know I've kind of sped over that contract bit, which is the nitty and gritty part as well. So hopefully that kind of makes some sense, and let me know if there's any other questions. Again, as well with contracts. I did skip over one important thing I did skip over is be prepared to pay for legal fees. If you're an artist negotiating a contract with a manager, it's very important, if you can, to get a lawyer on board to look over the contract and work through it with you. And it will cost you a few $1,000s, but remember that it is your career that's, it is your whole career and your life that you're kind of signing on to, and that is at stake. So it's very important to protect that, and that money will be worth investing into this. And if there is any reason, if for some reason it is really impossible for you to get a lawyer, but you are convinced that it's a great contract and you do want to sign it, then I'd suggest at least have some other people who maybe understand or know a little bit about contracts, or people, whether it's another industry professional who's seen a few contracts before, get them to look over it as well, just on your behalf, just so, it's easy as an artist to get, or for anyone to kind of get excited and blindsided and think that this is a great deal and kind of miss anything that may be a red flag, if you don't want to see a red flag, so you miss it. But yeah, legal fee, it is ideal to have a lawyer. So yeah, be prepared to pay for legal fees, but just make sure that you have someone to look over the contract on your behalf as well, regardless. Especially, from my experience as well, I've worked with a lot of the artists that I've signed on at the time were under 18 when I took them on. So when you're working with artists that young as well, you've got to get there's a lot more people involved too, because you've got to get the parents involved, and everything has to be agreed to by the parents as well, because they've got to sign on their behalf, still being under 18, which is another important thing that changes the ball game. But yeah, I won't go too much more in depth about that. Hopefully that covers some questions that may be about contracts. I know they're a whole big world in themselves, but there are some great online resources as well that can be super helpful in terms of getting to know what contracts look like, or what's included in them, and what to look out for in them. And hopefully, ideally, the manager that you're working with will, you want this relationship to work. We're not trying to, from my point of view anyway, as a manager, I'm not trying to give any artist a bad deal, but just be communicative and honest as an artist as well. And, really outline what you like and what you want from the deal, and just be careful for any red flags or things that don't look right. And don't be afraid to question anything either. Ask as many questions as you need, particularly when it comes to deals and contracts.
Speaking of questions, I have one quick one.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I don't know, it actually might be quite a big question. This one's from Kate. She says, on the payment side of things, how do managers afford to work for artists at all? I can't imagine that a 15 to 20%, even that at a good hourly rate. Is there a reasonable income point that an artist needs to be at before we jump into working for them, so that we can actually do this as a job and pay our bills?
Good question. Very good question. It is really another thing I say to people who are interested, I think it's on my next slide as well, people who are interested in being an artist manager, if you're getting into it for the money, well, then you're in completely the wrong place, because you're not going to become a millionaire essentially by being an artist manager. And it is, at the start as well, when you're working on building a artist or a band, or you're trying to build and expand their career, it's not easy. There is, to work with nothing and then to earn nothing. Ideally, when you are looking as a manager, when you are looking to sign on a band, you're going to hope that there's that comes back to the thing of looking for a package, that there is kind of something there to work with. So it will be harder for us, it will be harder for me as a manager to kind of commit to an artist that's kind of doesn't have much to show, or I can't see where it's going to go in terms of how it's going to, the revenue that's going to come from it, is I guess what I'm trying to say. But which then that kind of comes in with the rest of the team that artist managers will try help bring in as well. So if you've got, if you start then looking at getting a record deal or a label, you know, when you get other people on board in your team, as far as that, those are kind of the people that then that will then help bring in the money. As far as, you know, if you get a record deal and you've got some money there for the artist to work with, to then help launch the artist to play more shows or get out there more, to then bring more revenue in, so an artist manager can get some money. But that as well is where, you know, we touched on it before, the funding, like funding proposals and things like that, and the grants that you can get, particularly, you know, if you're a manager working with a younger band, like a lot of those, when I say younger, I always mean like up and coming. They don't actually have to be, you don't actually have to be young, can be any age, but up and coming bands will always, you know, they're the ones that a lot of those grants and things are in place for. So, and that's kind of where a lot of that money will tend to come from in the beginning, is by getting those grants, which will then help the manager. So the manager doesn't have to, because the manager, that's why as a manager, taking on an artist as well is an investment at the beginning, obviously, because a lot of the time you might often be putting your own money into it. So it's kind of, you take a gamble on the artist at the same time that you're going to put this time, money and effort into it. And then eventually you're going to hopefully see some return. And then once that return starts coming, then that commission becomes a little bit nicer for you. Hopefully, like, I know that fully probably doesn't quite answer the question, but there is sort of, again, no one set answer to that.
No worries. Thanks, Poppy. There are a couple more questions coming through, but I would love to get off this contract slide.
Too many big words. I think I've only got a couple more. I've only got a couple more slides to go, so we're almost there. Thanks.
If you're happy, then we're happy. Yeah, we're learning a lot.
So it's been a lot of talking. So now we've talked a lot about if you are an artist and you're interested and you're trying to find a manager, or you want to kind of take your career to the next level. This is kind of flipping that conversation to the other side of, if you're somebody who's interested in the interested in the industry or business side of it, and you want to be an artist manager. Or you could also even be an artist who wants to learn a little bit more about self-management and the skills that you need. Or you could be an artist yourself and take on other clients to manage if you want to, and if you've got that time to juggle it. But this is my favorite part to talk about, because obviously at the moment I'm passionate about trying to encourage people to become managers. But just as there is no type of exact person who makes for a perfect artist manager, there is sort of no one path to becoming an artist manager as well. But yeah, the value of a good music manager is, as I've talked about a lot today, is often their network and the opportunities they can create for their artists. So networking is key, really. Make as many connections within the industry as you possibly can. I know there's that cliche saying that is unfortunately very true within the industry, but it's not what you know, it's who you know. And that really does kind of come true within the music industry. Whether you're an artist, a manager, whichever role you have in the industry, it really helps in terms of who you know, and you never know how someone you meet can help you as well, whether they help you immediately or later on down the line. As a manager as well, I think there was a question maybe earlier on as well about what, if you're a manager, what you need to be like or things like that. So as a manager, it really helps if you're obviously highly organized, and you need to be great with people and have good communication skills, because you know you're dealing with lots of people on your artist's behalf. So you need to be able to kind of express clearly and for their best interests. And when you're negotiating deals and all things like that as well, you have to be very clear and be able to talk with people and know what you're talking about. And so you've got to be good with people and have those communication skills to be able to express what your artist's vision is, or what you as a manager are hoping to achieve for them. And that plays into being communicative with your artist as well, so they know what's happening at all times. and have an understanding of the industry. So as a manager, you need to have an understanding of the industry as it stands today, as well as being passionate about the music industry, because it can start, you can get into management and by starting out and being super passionate and driven about music, but you do need to have a little bit of knowledge about the industry and business side as well. So most managers you will find are very passionate about not only music and artists, but also the industry as a whole. And one other important thing of becoming an artist manager is volunteer and learn about other areas of the industry. So being a manager, as I pointed out, is just as much about knowing how the industry works as a whole. And so a lot of skills and knowledge that you learn in any part within any job within the industry can be useful universally. So maybe you're like, for example, I did a lot of my kind of start in the industry came with a lot of volunteering. So working at the radio station and filming and touring with Gin Wigmore, a lot of that was all voluntary work, or, you know, I volunteered for a number of different management companies as well along the way. And not even management, I dabbled in like publicity and media and other fields as well. So like if you're interested in artist management, the more you know about different fields and different parts of the industry, the more helpful it is. That knowledge is going to be useful to you regardless of if it's, you know, if you're in radio, you can use some of that knowledge and bring it into artist management. So volunteer, I'm a big fan of volunteering and just getting out there, which dives into the next point of just dive right in. Really, there's no kind of better way to get into artist management or get into the music industry than kind of first hand-on experience, really. So reach out to any up and coming bands, or maybe you've got some musicians within your friend group and offer to help out. Let them know that you're interested in artist management and maybe they're playing a few shows. Don't hesitate to kind of reach out and say, hey, maybe I could reach out to the venues for you and the promoters for you. And then on that hand, that takes the pressure off you as well. Then going as a self-managed artist to these venues like we were talking about before, your friend can go to them for you and say, hey, this artist is great, I think you should book them. And then it's not seen as necessarily coming straight from you, and it just gives them some experience in the industry as well. And if you're an artist, it takes that pressure off you. So yeah, dive right in and don't be afraid to kind of give it a go, because I learned a lot about that management world by just kind of jumping on tour with artists and kind of playing assistant to tour managers and general managers and kind of watching them and shadowing them and seeing what it is they do. So there's nothing really like just giving it a go and first-hand experience, which then takes me to the study versus not study kind of argument / conversation. I was always, you know, when you're at school, they always place a lot of pressure on you to go to school and then go to university afterwards and get the degree and study and whatever it is that you may want to do. I'm not for or against studying when it comes to jobs within the music industry. I think personally, my experience, I finished school and then I went to Mains, which is the Music and Audio Institute of New Zealand. And I started studying artist and event management, and I lasted 2 weeks before I got offered the job at CRS. So I took that and then left. But to be fair, I mean, I didn't learn, even though to be fair, 2 weeks is that's not a good amount of time to give it in terms of like, that's all of the very early on introductory stuff. But the 2 weeks that I was there, I kind of didn't learn anything new that I didn't necessarily had already learned by just volunteering or getting out there and giving it a go and getting that first hand experience. And there is obviously lots of like, you can go to university, and there is, I know like lots of different business degrees and management degrees that you can then kind of center down to be focused on music. And I'm totally like all for that. That can be super helpful. But I think particularly when it does come to the music industry, there is nothing like that first-hand experience and actually doing it, because studying and learning and sitting in university and hearing people talk about how to tour or how to book tours for your artist or how to help them launch their careers and things like that is it's interesting and it can be helpful, but nothing will kind of teach you as much as just being kind of thrown in the deep end and learning how to do it. And yes, that may be difficult, and there will be, it's not going to be successful. You're not going to be successful straight away with that, but you'll learn a hell of a lot more potentially along the way if you give it a crack. And yeah, so I mean, study versus not study, it's entirely up to you as the person. But I think the music industry as a whole, a lot of the managers that I know and artists who are managed by some great people have a similar story to me, in that they started going to university and then they left to actually just do it because they figured out, why don't I just like do it now and dive right in. So yeah, I'm not suggesting that you shouldn't study or that you should, but I think like I just believe that you should try and get as much experience as you can, whether that's in management or publicity or whichever role it is. I think it's super helpful. And we've already touched on this as well, but if you're doing it for the money, you're in the wrong place, because it's not necessarily going to make you a millionaire. But that's why artist managers are always the ones who are most managers, or hopefully every manager you meet, is very passionate about music and they do it for the love. I mean, that's certainly why I'm in it and why I got into the industry as well, is because I'm a massive music fan, and I love the idea of being able to help grow and launch artist careers and help them get to where they want to be. All right, I know so much talking. We're on the last slide, I promise, and then hit me with any questions, and then you can go and have your dinner or lunch or whatever it is. The last slide that I had is kind of, and again, this is one as well, I've just got a few kind of small little points on this, because there's no one real kind of set way that I can say, oh, this is how to break through, this is how to make your artist really successful and help them break through the noise. But here's a few kind of little like points that could be helpful in terms of that. So with breaking through, there's about 40,000 songs on average uploaded to DSPs every day, which is a heck of a lot. So how, with that in mind, like how do you break through and make sure that your song as an artist or your artist's song as a manager is one of the 40,000 that is heard across DSPs? And the one I like to focus on with that is make sure that you have a really strong digital marketing social media plan in place, because I mean, social media is obviously such a massive tool. It's changed the industry a lot over the last 5 to 10 years. And it's a huge tool that's predominantly free. Obviously, you can do lots of advertising and marketing and put spend behind it, but it's a huge resource at pretty much everyone's fingertips. And with those as well, with all those different social medias that you have, so like Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, TikTok, all of that, I'd suggest just create and release as much content as you possibly can, because it's very helpful to, again, get your name out there more, get fans and people engaged and watching, and just to build your fan base. So if you are eventually going to a manager, they can see that you've got that package or some engagement or interest there, that they go, oh, people are listening to this, people are loving this, people are going to the shows. Like, it doesn't create and release as much as you can, because it's always very helpful. And that doesn't mean you don't have to, like, you've still got to have a good plan in place in terms of what you're releasing. Obviously, don't just like, people used to post pictures of them going to the dentist on Instagram. Do what you will in terms of within your plan, but the more kind of content, the better, particularly when you're trying to build up your career as an artist. Because I see a lot of artists starting out on their social media will kind of use it. I mean, it is a marketing tool, but if you're only posting whenever you've got a gig coming up, it's people are kind of only going to see that as, you're only marketing when you're only using social media, you're only active on there when something's happening, when you want people to buy a ticket. But if they get to, it's such a great tool for storytelling as well now, particularly with Instagram and the likes of TikTok kind of becoming as big as it is now as well. There's so much that you can do to kind of grow and show your personality alongside that. So when you do go, oh, hey, and by the way, I've got a gig coming up, people are even more interested and excited to come, because it's not just, oh, the last time she posted was 2 months ago when she had a gig, and then now she's posting again and she's got another gig coming up. That's the only time we ever hear from them. So yeah, create and release as much content as you have as you can, but have a good plan in place. TikTok, for example, has become a massive go-to platform for discovering new music. 67% of the app's users now are more likely to kind of seek out music that they hear on TikTok from there going on to DSPs and searching for that music. So yeah, TikTok, for example, has become a massive tool for fans out there discovering new music and becoming a critical part of an artist's storytelling again. And TikTok as well as a great cross-platform. It's got lots of good benefits there in terms of that, you can put up stuff on TikTok that can then also be used on Instagram Reels. And then people across YouTube often create lots of YouTube compilations of lots of TikToks, and then they may use your song if that's floating about there. I could obviously go into a whole world of conversations about TikTok from my experience with Super Lonely going a little bit hectic on there, but I've already been talking long enough. So if you have any other specific questions about that, just let me know. But I'll gloss over this last little bit. Another thing that can be good for helping your artist break through is features and collaborations. So, and this can kind of happen at any stage as an artist as well. So maybe you've got, again, friends who are in bands, perhaps they're a little more well-known than you, or you've both got pretty decent, good audiences, and say you're a pop artist, and then you don't know how many, so I guess I'll use Benny as an example again. So she, early on, her song Night Garden, she did with Bakar and Kenny Beats. And so for her as well, she's a lot more into that, and her audience is kind of that indie pop sort of and pop world basically. And so we're not sure, how many of those people in the hip hop world where those guys are from were actually fans or listening to her music or knew about her. And so the idea of kind of featuring on another person's song or collaborating with another artist just again helps kind of build your audience growth and diversification. So it can kind of help you get, appeal to other new fans who maybe these hip hop people didn't know who you were before, but you collaborate and do a song with a hip hop artist and suddenly they really love the song, and that'll lead them to listening to your other material, and suddenly you've grown your audience growth even just a little bit. And the growth on that it could be massive or it could only be small, but the beauty of having a feature and collaboration can really be good for growing that and reaching out to different audiences who may not necessarily know who you are, or may not be your typical people who are searching to listen to pop music or who are searching to listen to rock music. But if they come across the song and go, oh, whoa, this chick actually has a really cool voice, they're more than likely to go and then check out your other stuff. And then you've got yourself, hopefully, another fan. And we've touched on this as well, but for breaking through of the social media side of it as well is create a brand and a personality as an artist as well. So being an artist now is so much. You've got your music, and that's awesome. That's why everyone loves you as well, because everyone loves music and we love what you're putting out there into the world and we're listening to it. But social media has allowed you to kind of become this, you are a brand as an artist, and it's allowed you to share so much more of your personality. And so when you're sharing things to social media as well and trying to really break through to your audience, kind of a big part of that early on as well is kind of finding your voice and your personality and knowing who your fans are. So knowing who you're speaking to, essentially, it really pays to do a little bit of that research into, okay, most of my fan base are males. Well, then maybe, this is just know who you're kind of targeting, know who your target audience is, or know who you're speaking to, and show them a bit more of your personality as well. So you can that'll help with the breakthrough thing if you know who you're targeting or who you want to target and who you're speaking to. And the last point with the breakthrough thing, which I think we've also touched on, is manage expectations. So it's important to manage your artists and your own, as a manager as well, expectations of what's possible. So, you know, the idea of breaking through and becoming a really successful artist is amazing and is great, but kind of it's important to early on kind of to distinguish and kind of sit back and think about the reality of what's possible in terms of, you know, so we really want, say if Maroki wants to play Coachella, and be like, yeah, that's a really awesome idea. And I'd love for him to get to play at Coachella. But at the moment, like, you know, we've just got a song on Triple J and that's a really exciting win for us. So maybe we should manage the expectations and go, let's step back a little from Coachella and work backwards first. But yeah, so managing expectations, I guess, in any part as an artist as well and as a manager is important for anyone, because, you know, you never want to get your hopes up too much before something comes crashing down. So just manage expectations on both parts, because as my little quote here says at the bottom, it will never happen overnight, despite what some people, music fans, may think or see. You know, if you've never heard of Lorde before and then Royals suddenly comes out of nowhere, you're like, whoa, she's a genius, this song is massive. Like, yes, it is, and it is a great song and she's an incredible artist, but that song didn't happen overnight. And most of those fans, unlike other artists or industry people, will know and have seen the months or years or whatever work that went into it before leading up to that. So yeah, just remember that it is a long journey, it is a long pathway. It will never happen overnight. The road to success is long, arduous, and full of unexpected lessons. So be patient, take your time, and if it's meant to happen, it will happen, and you can do it. And then that is me.
Amazing. Thanks, Poppy. Oh, thank you so much for all of your time today. We have a couple more questions that we'll just fire through quickly. I know this is, you know, supposed to be like an hour's thing and it's now 2 hours, but thank you everyone for
Thanks
staying.
for being with me, guys. Sorry, at first I was worried I wouldn't have enough stuff. Now I realize my notes of telling myself to stop jibber jabbering on didn't really work.
It was great. You're such a wealth of knowledge, so thank you for sharing. Just while we're answering these questions, I've just chucked something else in the chat as well. This is just our feedback form for Music ACT. If you got something out of today, which if you've made it here for the last 2 hours, sounds like you probably would have. Thank you so much. Please put some feedback in there. It helps us just keep putting on awesome things like this, helps us get great people like Poppy, helps us show the people that fund us that we're doing a good job. So please leave your feedback and tell us how to improve. So first question. This one is from Kim again. She asks, if the artist has some jobs that are not related to their artist brand, like a few pub gigs or little things like that, would the manager ask for a commission on that kind of income?
If it's separate, that's something you can discuss, and obviously you need to be upfront about in the beginning to say that you've got this other thing going on. So you'll often see that kind of happen. Maybe say it's actually kind of happening at the moment with a duo that I've started managing a little while ago, and one of them is going off to start a solo career, and so she'll have that on the side, but I'm only invested in and managing them as a duo, so she can go off and do her solo career, and I can't make any money off that unless I'd come up with a management deal or contract with that and manage her as a solo artist as well. But if you've got two split things happening, then no, if you're playing pub gigs or whatever as yourself, or you've got a different artist project, depending on, like, it can be a little tricky figuring out where that line is, but say you've got a stage name and you are doing, you know, this is my artist project, this is what I want to do, this is what you're managing, oh, by the way, I also sometimes go off and do this. Maybe later on those pub gigs, depending on how your career goes, may just blow up and become a little bit too crazy, and then it will become a part of that, become a part of you as an artist and the deal that you're in within management. But if you have something on the side like that, as long as you're clear and upfront and it's kind of fully discussed and you've had a conversation about it in the beginning, you don't have the manager won't make any money from that, as long as that's clear and there's like a set line there to know what they're getting income from and what they're not, and what they're managing and what they're not, if that makes sense.
It does make a lot of sense. Thanks, Poppy. The next question is from Ryan. He asked, in the beginning of your career, how did you do most of your networking?
I was the very early stages of my career getting into the music industry is very embarrassing because I was very persistent and very annoying. But I say to a lot of artist managers and people that I now work with in the industry who I used to talk with back then, I say to them that I can't believe they still talk to me because I was so annoying. But that's kind of almost the way that it pays to be. I mean, that's the way that I got into the industry and got to where I did, was by making those connections and networks. But the New Zealand Music Directory that we have here, which basically essentially just kind of lists almost every music company that exists within New Zealand, and it has a little bit about what they do and maybe a contact email for them. I just became basically, I'm just trying to glamorize saying that I was a super stalker, and I would just find contact details for managers and companies and get in touch with them. And because when I first became interested in within the industry, I was about 12 years old. So my first, which is why New Zealand Music Madness is such a great name, because I was 13 years old when I started that. Which is, so yeah, even something as simple as that, like, not saying you have to go out and create a blog and start interviewing artists or talking to people, but like I started that blog as a way to kind of get, I thought by interviewing artists was my best way to like get into networking and meeting new people, and which it did. It really helped me with that. So yeah, I mean, don't be afraid to kind of go to email and get in touch with lots of people and just kind of ask them. I used to email all of these managers 100 questions, like a couple, like every month or so. I'd get in touch and be like, hey, it's me again, can you answer this? And a lot of them, of course, there was some people that never came back to me, and that's bound to happen. But if you are passionate and you show that you're determined and really interested in the industry, and that drive and passion is there and obvious, then a lot of people will be willing to help answer your questions, and and that's why as well, now when people come to me with any questions, or I get an email from someone who's really interested in getting into the industry and being a manager or perhaps being managed, I will try as much as I can to kind of go back and answer their questions, because I know how much it means when someone gets back to you, because it's so exciting. Like when I was 15 and people would respond to my emails, I would run around the house and get excited and be like, oh my God, so-and-so wrote back to me. I thought it was so cool that they'd spend their time answering your questions. So yeah, and as well, you can kind of find out about industry events as well, or things like showcases. Try and, get on mailing lists and stuff like that for those types of events and occasions, because that's another great way where you can kind of go to, or even gigs as well, just kind of do your stalking in a non-weird way of who people are. And then once you're at these events, you kind of know the right people to approach, and then you can just be friendly and go up to them also in a non-weird, creepy way and introduce yourself, and tell them that you're really interested in the industry. Let them know who you are, and maybe say that you'd be keen to catch up for coffee, or can I email you, or something like that. And maybe it doesn't come to anything, but maybe later on down the line, someone's looking for, which is kind of how I got my job with CRS. I met as many people as I could, and then they were suddenly looking for an assistant manager to come in and help them, predominantly with social media and stuff like that at the time when that was becoming a big tool for marketing. They sort of asked around and to see if anyone within the industry knew anyone, and because I'd kind of made it my goal to go out there and meet as many people as I could, a bunch of people just recommended me, and that's how they then reached out to me. So yeah, just networking is, I like to say networking is key. And I know it can be like really cringe, but it is it is who you know, not what you know thing. And yeah, don't be afraid to even email managers as well. And instead of inundating them with being like, I really want you to manage me, blah, 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 just send them an email and say, hey, like, I love your roster. I think what you're doing with your artists is really cool. I have a couple of questions. Do you think maybe we could go for coffee, or maybe we could have a chat, instead of just fully first going out with the first email of all of these questions or all of these things? Kind of try and start some sort of relationship or something with them, because again, these people that you meet early on, maybe you meet them once or twice, you never know how they can kind of help you later on down the line and what they may be able to do for you, or what you may be able to do for them later on as well if you start working in the industry.
Nice.
I just gave away how much of a stalker I was. Great.
That's good. People need to know. It's okay. It's all right. The second or third last question, I think, comes from Grant. He says, do a lot of artist managers start with an office job or a uni degree unrelated to music and then transition into artist management? Or do you find that it's something that you get into right from the very beginning?
It can happen both ways, to be honest. You can be like studying a business degree or a management degree or something, or be interested in music, and then you kind of realize that, this degree isn't exactly what I want to do. Maybe I'm going to go out and give something else a go, and then you go into management. But from my experience and a lot of the managers that I've worked with or know and talk with, a lot of it generally they do kind of get into it quite early on from the start, because it's something that you're passionate about, and you will kind of just start, volunteering or experience or helping out a friend. And then that leads to, oh, look, now suddenly they're doing more things, and I'm going to properly manage them now, or, whatever. It can happen both ways. Yeah. There's no reason to say that you can't be at university studying something completely different and then leave and then get into artist management. But a lot of managers I know, I never kind of really set out to be an artist manager. I sort of just fell into it, which is can be the way for a lot of artist managers. But yeah, it can happen so many different ways, really.
Nice. Alrighty, I've got a couple more questions. Thanks so much for your time today, Poppy.
No, all good.
This one is from Kira. She asked, when finding Benny, did you know that she would do as well as she did? When you're looking for more artists, are you trying to find those that will achieve at that sort of level? And how do you know if they're going to be able to do well?
That's a good question. When you take on, as a manager, when you take on any artist, you never know how well they're going to do. Or, I didn't start managing Benny thinking, oh God, she's going to be massive, or this is going to blow up. I remember, I'll let my secret out, but I remember the first time I heard Super Lonely, I was like, oh yeah, this is pretty cool. I didn't the first time I heard it, I didn't think it was a bad song, but the first time I heard it, I didn't go, whoa, this is epic. This is going to blow up. It's going to be massive. So it's kind of you never really, I feel like as an artist manager, deciding what artists you're going to take on, you never really know. Maybe you've got, the first time I ever heard Stella's voice was, I discovered her she was putting up some demos on SoundCloud, and I came across a couple of those demos, and I heard her voice and I thought, whoa, she's got something really cool here. And we brought her into the studio to do a few sessions with Josh Fountain, her producer, who she now works with. And they came up with a couple of songs. And when I first heard them, I thought, yeah, okay, these are really cool. This is special. And then you get to know her as a person as well. And, even if you're a fan of her music, you'll see that she's quite quirky, and she's quite out there, and she's quite funny. And that's very much who she is as just a general everyday person as well, not just as Benny the artist. So kind of with that, seeing her, getting to know her as a person, and her personality and the music that she was coming up with kind of intertwined, I thought the thing that hit me with her was, yeah, there's something really special here. She's got this unique, crazy quirkiness going on, but then the music has some really, it's got some nice depth to it, and these songs could really connect with other people. So, but you never really know that they're gonna blow up, or what's going to happen. The whole Super Lonely blowing up on TikTok, that was totally natural. We didn't put any marketing money or hire an influencer to come up with that dance or anything. We kind of, when that sort of blew up, we were sort of scrambling around trying to figure out what TikTok actually was. So it's you never really know what's going to happen. And then when it does, particularly with Benny, because it happened quite quickly once that song kind of blew up, you've then got to, that in itself was a big learning curve for me, to be whoa, okay, suddenly I'm working with this artist at a whole different level. We've got to step it up now and we're now suddenly getting offers to go on the Ellen Show or the Tonight Show, whereas before, you know, we were kind of excited in getting songs on the radio and Triple J, and we were really trying to get student radio to play it still and stuff like that. So yeah, you never really know that an artist is going to blow up. But what was the second part of that question? Sorry, there was another tiny little part to it. See, I ramble on. Sorry.
That's all right. Second part of that question was, how do you know? How do you know if they're going to do well? But I'll read the question in full again, just so we all know. When finding Benny, did you know that she was going to do as well as she did? When you're looking for more artists, are you trying to find those that will achieve at that sort of level?
Oh, right. Finding other artists? No, not necessarily. I mean, that's the thing as well as a manager, and with being part of a management company who's got a roster of multiple different artists, it's kind of the exciting thing for me is working with artists who are all different stages of their career. So I'm never looking for an artist who is a similar artist, or, you know, I want to have a very diversified roster of artists. And, you know, a couple of our artists are quite high tier, but one of my favorite parts is, you know, I started working with Stella from the very beginning, and then you build that up into something that is a lot bigger, and that's the fun part, is watching it grow. And but yeah, it's kind of, you've got to build that. And I always sort of go about looking for artists. I'm always, you know, listening to music, seeing what's out there, looking online. And that's why I love it when people invite me to shows as well, because maybe I don't know who you are, but if you've told me a few times that you're playing, eventually I'll make it along on the third time that you've told me. And then maybe, because yeah, playing live is such a big thing that managers will look out for as well. You know, no manager is really going to kind of agree or take on an artist without seeing them play live a couple of times. So yeah, we're always looking for multiple different things, but I love looking for different artists at different stages and helping them build up into something bigger.
Thanks, Poppy. Oh my God. All right. I'm cutting off the questions now, but I have one last 3-part question.
Feel free to hit me up later on as well, everyone here, if there is any other questions that you really want to know. My Instagram and whatever is always open. So just if you do have any other burning questions that I can help you with, don't hesitate to reach out.
Well, that tackles the first part of this question, which is how can we find your business contact details, Poppy? Not in a stalkerish way, just wanting to network.
A stalker always says not in a stalkerish way. I'll tell you that. From one stalker to another, I know the tricks. My contact detail. Well, I can actually. Oh, should I? Maybe if I say my email, you can just write it in the chat.
Sure. Yeah, I'll pop it in.
Yeah. Oh, you've got my email, don't you? You can put
I'll pop it in there.
But yeah, if you on the CRS website, you should pretty easily be able to find. So I think we're crsmanagement.co.nz, and so on there you'll be able to find my contact details as well, along with our roster as well. If you're interested in seeing, you know, or learning a little bit more about who else we manage, or, you know, get an idea of the company. And then I spend a bit of time on Instagram, so you can find me there as well if you need. But yeah, there you go. Stalk away.
Stalk away. Then the second part of this question is, I can find them again. Sorry. Yeah. So could you have a second job as an artist manager, or is it always a full-time job?
That is a good question. I think if you're starting out as an artist manager and you're kind of managing maybe 1 or 2 bands, and you know that income isn't there yet, well then you can definitely have some other jobs. Like for quite a while when I first started at CRS, I still did a lot of working at events, just working the door or working merch, or still continued on freelance writing for various other magazines and places like that to get some other income coming in. And if you've got the time to kind of be able to juggle that still, if you're still just kind of working at a low level, then yeah, definitely if everyone needs to pay their bills and everyone needs to have money coming in. So if you're not making enough money from artist management in the beginning, then definitely nothing should stop you from having another job, whether it be in the industry or not. If it is in the industry, then that can be good to help, you know, get you in front of the people that you need to be and making more connections. But it doesn't necessarily have to be as well, obviously. But yeah, you can definitely have another job in the beginning, but then once things start becoming, if and when things start becoming a little bit busier and it becomes harder for you to juggle that, and then maybe your artist is starting to blow up to a point where you're getting a little bit more money, or you actually are making some money from it, then it is hopefully easy enough for you to be able to like step back from that. But there are other ways definitely within the industry or not to make money at the same time if you're still developing your career as an artist manager as well and not quite making enough money from that yet.
All right, and then the last bit of this question is, sorry for so many questions. How do managers handle artists who get cancelled? Are there ones who usually have to clean up the mess, or do they just drop the artists?
That is a good question also, and that's also something that I've been through with a band in the past, to some extent, kind of. But usually, I mean, very rarely, I mean, well, I guess it depends of the case and the integrity and what's gone on, but like most men, depending on what's happened, obviously, like for the experience that I went through, there was no way that I was gonna drop the artist not just because of, obviously, you know, all these things have to be handled very carefully, and depending on what it is, there can be a lot that feeds into it. But I think unless, you know, if it causes a lot of strife and maybe the band are breaking up, or there's no way of kind of rebuilding, or perhaps the manager and the band also, it creates some real conflict between there, well then yeah, if dropping the band is kind of the only option or the only way out that you can see, then you can take that path if you want. For me personally, I think I'm very big on loyalty, so if there's a way to work through it, depending, it's very case dependent, I guess, but if there's a way to kind of work through it, maybe, you know, the band goes on a hiatus and takes some time off for a while, and then you can kind of deal with it that way. But in terms of getting other people involved, as well as depending on how serious it is, well then yeah, like you can, I mean, it pays to, it doesn't, usually it will not necessarily completely fall on the manager, but the manager is the one who will bring these extra people in to help out. Because as a manager as well, if you've been working with this band and or artist for a while and something happens, you'll be not blindsided by thinking that, by jumping to the artist's defense, because you've got to sit back, and your role as a manager is to kind of sit back, see what the case is, and listen to both sides of the story and kind of know what's going on and what's happened. But you know, if you've got a good solid relationship with this band or artist that have potentially or may have done something wrong or awful or horrible that they shouldn't have, then you don't want to kind of just be like, oh yeah, but they're my band and I love them and they couldn't do any wrong. It's then your duty as the manager to bring in a second person who's maybe not attached to that band or artist in the way that you are, that works with them directly, to bring in an outside person, whether, depending on what the case is, maybe it's the police, maybe it's a lawyer, maybe it's there's also publicists who deal strictly just with crisis management, so they can help. You can bring in a crisis management publicist who then works with the band to go across how they're gonna deal with that publicly. Maybe, you know, they want to make a statement on social media, but if they're getting cancelled, anything they say, people are going to tear you down. So you've got to you can work then with the crisis publicist in a way to best put out some kind of statement that is sort of just a good statement to be like, here, this is what I've got to say. We're not trying to feed into it anymore or anything, but there is definitely ways of, you know, it doesn't necessarily all fall on the manager, but it is probably the manager's duty as being connected to the artist to then look outside of that and go, okay, I may be too far in this, I need another opinion and someone else that can help me kind of understand what's happening here, and maybe you can work through it, or maybe the only way through it is to drop the band and that relationship ends. And yeah, it's very dependent on the case, but it can kind of there's multiple ways you can go about it. And yeah, it is unfortunately something that is the whole cancel culture thing is happening, is very kind of out there right now, which like I'm not necessarily for. I'm for speaking up about all this stuff, obviously, and things that are going on. But yeah, there's ways to do it, and there's ways to get through it without ripping people down completely. But that's a whole nother conversation, and you guys are probably already sick of my voice.
Not at all. Thanks so much, Poppy. We'll have to get you back because you've obviously got so much to say and so much to talk about. So thank you for giving us your afternoon. And thank you everyone else as well for joining us.
Thanks everyone for listening and for staying and asking questions. And hopefully my mumbled jumbled conversation gave you some insight.